The first time I saw the truck, I knew something was wrong. It was parked crooked in our driveway, like it had every right to be there. Bright blue paint catching the late afternoon sun, temporary tags taped in the back window. My brother Mason was leaning against the driver's door with both thumbs hooked in his jeans, wearing the same smug grin he used whenever he thought he'd pulled something off. I had my Purdue orientation packet under one arm and a grocery bag in the other. I stood there for a second, staring at the truck, then at him. "Whose is that?" He pushed off the door and tossed me the keys. "Take a guess." I didn't catch them. They hit the gravel. He laughed. "Relax, it's mine." My stomach tightened before my brain had even caught up. Mason was 22, worked on and off at an auto body shop, and had been about to get his life together for at least 3 years. The last car he owned had died behind the Dollar General in March and stayed there so long the manager threatened to tow it. I looked past him toward the porch. My mom was standing in the doorway with her arms folded, watching us in that careful, blank way people do when they already know the conversation isn't going to go well. "Mason," I said, "how did you buy a truck?" He smiled wider. "Good deal." "From where?" "Crossroads Chevy." "With what money?" That smile flickered for half a second. "Why are you making it weird?" Because it was weird. Because 2 days earlier, my mom had reminded me to pay my housing deposit by Friday. Because all through high school, every time I picked up an extra shift at the diner or skipped a football game to study, I told myself it would be worth it, because at least I wasn't going to start adult life drowning in debt. Because my college fund wasn't some vague family dream. It was real. I'd seen the statements. I knew about how much was in there. And because I knew my brother. That night after dinner, I opened the banking app on my phone. The account balance was just over $1,100. I refreshed it 3 times because I honestly thought I had to be looking at the wrong screen. Then I walked into the kitchen, where my mom was rinsing plates and Mason was digging around in the fridge for leftover meatloaf. And I said, very calmly, "Where did the money go?" Neither of them answered right away. That was my answer. I grew up in a small town outside Lafayette, Indiana, in a 1-story ranch house with a gravel driveway, thin walls, and a garage that always smelled like motor oil and old wood. The house belonged to my grandfather, Warren. He'd bought it years before and let us live there cheap after my dad died. That part matters. My dad died when I was 10. Forklift accident at the distribution center where he worked. One minute he was packing my lunch and yelling for Mason to quit hogging the bathroom. And the next, there were casseroles on our counter and adults lowering their voices every time I walked into a room. After that, money became something we talked around. Not all the time. Just enough for me to understand that some bills got paid fast, some got paid late, and some sat on the microwave under a magnet until my mom was ready to open them. She worked the front desk at a dentist's office in town. Mason was 18 by then and acted like grief had happened to him hardest, which maybe it had in its own way. He got loud, restless, impossible to pin down. He'd start community college, drop classes, take a warehouse job, quit, date girls who drove him everywhere, talk about moving to Nashville, never go. I learned early that in our family, reliability didn't get celebrated. It got expected. I was the kid teachers liked, the one who didn't need chasing. I got decent grades, then good grades, then the kind of grades people in town brought up to my mom at the grocery store. I worked weekends at Mel's Diner starting at 16. I filled out scholarship applications at the kitchen table, while Mason watched lifted truck videos on his phone beside me. The college fund had started small. My dad opened it with a few $100s and a joke about future textbooks costing more than a truck payment. After he died, part of the insurance money went into a money market account at First Farmers Bank. It wasn't a fancy 529 or some perfect financial plan. It was just a safe account with my mom's name on it and mine added later, plus years of deposits from my grandpa every birthday, every Christmas, every tax refund he could spare. He never called it the college fund. He called it your way out, not because he wanted me to leave the family, because he wanted me to have the option. A woman ought to have her own money, he used to say, sipping gas station coffee in his garage while I handed him wrenches. Doesn't matter if it's for school, rent, a car, or walking out on somebody who thinks you're trapped. Money buys choices. By senior year, that account held a little over $28,000. Not enough for 4 years at Purdue by itself, but enough to make it possible. Enough for me to believe I could go. Mason knew all of that. So did my mom. When I asked where the money went, my mom shut off the faucet and dried her hands slowly, like buying herself time. "Mia," she said, "don't start yelling." I hadn't yelled. Not yet. I held up my phone. "The balance says $1,100. Mason closed the fridge. "Can we not do this like I robbed a bank?" I stared at him. "Did you?" He rolled his eyes. "It's called borrowing." "From my college fund?" "From the family." That was the first time I realized he'd already built himself a version of the story where he was the reasonable one. I looked at my mom. Tell me he's lying. She looked down at the dish towel in her hands instead. "It's temporary," she said. I actually laughed, just once, because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Temporary? He needed reliable transportation, she said. This could help him get steady work. I felt my face getting hot. "So you gave him my college money?" "It wasn't like that." "What was it like?" Mason stepped in before she could answer. "I got a chance to join a guy from the shop on contract jobs. Fences, decks, hauling, cleanup. I needed a truck. You need a truck to make truck money." "You bought a truck with leather seats." He shrugged. "Used trucks are expensive." "It was my money. It's not gone forever." I turned back to my mom. "My housing deposit is due Friday." "We'll figure it out." "No," I said. "You were supposed to not touch it. That was the figuring it out part." She exhaled hard through her nose, and her whole expression changed from guilty to defensive. "Lots of kids take out loans, Mia." That one landed. Because all those years, every speech about sacrifice, every time she told me not to worry because my dad had wanted this for me, every time she said, "At least you'll have a start we didn't have," all of that collapsed into one sentence. Lots of kids take out loans. Mason crossed his arms. "You act like you're the only one in this family trying to build something." "I'm acting like you stole from me." "I didn't steal from you." "You took money that had my name on it and bought a truck." "For work." "You bought oversized tires for work?" That shut him up for a second, which told me everything. The next morning, I drove to the bank before my shift at Mel's. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I just wanted somebody in a building with fluorescent lights and a name tag to tell me this was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. The woman at the desk knew me. Small town. She lowered her voice when she pulled up the account. There had been a cashier's check made out to Crossroads Chevrolet the week before. Then a transfer into my mom's checking account. Then another debit at the dealership 2 days later. I asked the woman to print it. She hesitated, then slid the paper across the desk. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely read the numbers. Not only had they used my college fund for the down payment, they'd used the extra $5,000 my grandpa had deposited in April. after selling off a bunch of old tools and equipment. He told me at Easter that money was for books, a laptop, and not eating ramen every night. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot with the AC blasting and cried so hard my chest hurt. Not movie crying, not pretty crying, just that ugly, silent kind where your throat feels raw and you keep wiping your face because you're embarrassed, even though nobody can see you. Then I called Purdue and asked if there was any way to extend the deposit deadline. The woman in financial aid was kind, but not kind in a magical way. Kind in a real way. She said there was an appeal process if family finances changed unexpectedly, but I'd still need to submit documentation and probably take federal loans. She gave me an email address and told me to send whatever I had. I thanked her like I wasn't breaking apart in a Honda Civic outside a strip mall. Then I went to work and served coffee to people who asked if I was excited for college. I smiled and said, "Yeah, nervous but excited." I did not say, "My brother is driving my tuition around town with a fresh wax job." For 3 days, nobody in my house acted normal. But nobody acted sorry either. My mom kept talking about the future like it was a puzzle we'd solve if I would just stop making everyone uncomfortable. She used phrases like short-term problem and family helping family. Mason stayed out late and came home smelling like gas station cologne and fried food, jangling those truck keys every time he walked through the kitchen, like I might somehow forget. On Thursday night, I found the dealership paperwork in the junk drawer under takeout menus and batteries. Maybe that was snooping. I don't care. The buyer's sheet had my mom's signature on the cashier's check copy. So that was the secret part I'd been trying not to know. She hadn't been pressured. She hadn't been tricked. She hadn't let it happen because Mason wore her down. She had gone with him. She had helped. When she got home from work, I was waiting at the kitchen table with the paperwork spread out in front of me. She stopped cold when she saw it. "How long were you planning to lie to me?" I asked. Her shoulders dropped. I wasn't lying. "You looked me in the face and said we'd figure it out." "We are figuring it out. You signed for it." She sat down slowly across from me. For the first time, she looked tired instead of defensive. Older. Like maybe she'd spent the last week trying to convince herself she'd done the right thing, and it wasn't working as well anymore. "He came to me crying," she said quietly. Said this was finally his chance. Said he was tired of feeling like the screw-up in his own house. I stared at her. "And what am I?" I asked. "That's not what I meant." "No, what am I? Because it sounds like I'm the one person in this family you assumed would survive being betrayed." Her eyes filled, but I wasn't ready to comfort her. "He said he'd pay it back," she whispered. "By August?" She didn't answer, because we both knew Mason had never paid back a thing in his life. That Saturday, we went to my aunt's cookout because my mom said we were not hiding from family over this. Like showing up to eat hot dogs next to the person who emptied your future was some kind of character test. Mason pulled in late in the truck. Of course he did. 3 of my cousins went outside to look at it. My uncle whistled when he saw it. Mason soaked it up like a man dying of thirst. "Nice ride," somebody said. He grinned and pointed at the grill. "Got lucky." I stood by the cooler with a paper plate in my hand and watched him play successful for an audience that didn't know the prop had been paid for with my life. Then my aunt asked me, loud enough for half the patio to hear, "So when do you leave for Purdue?" Before I could answer, Mason laughed and said, "Might be sticking around local after all. Family budget meeting." A couple people chuckled because they thought it was harmless sibling stuff. I looked right at him. "Tell them why." The patio went quiet. He took a sip of beer. Mia, tell them why I might not go. My mom said my name in that warning tone she used when I was 12. I ignored her. Mason set the bottle down. I borrowed some money. I'm paying it back. My college fund, I said. Nobody moved. My aunt looked from him to my mom. My uncle's face changed first, then everybody else's. My mom stood up so fast her lawn chair tipped backward. This is not the place. No, I said. The place was our kitchen 3 weeks ago when you decided his truck mattered more than my school. Mason's jaw tightened. Can you stop acting like you're better than everybody because you got into Purdue? I laughed without meaning to. This isn't about me being better. It's about you thinking I'm easier to sacrifice. That shut the whole yard down. I left before anyone could stop me. Just got in my car and drove. I didn't go home for 5 hours. The person who noticed was Grandpa. Every Sunday since I was little, I'd gone over to his place around 11. Sometimes for lunch, sometimes just to sit in the garage while he messed with whatever old engine he had pulled apart that week. When I didn't show, he called. I let it ring twice before answering. You sick? He asked. No. You mad at me? That almost made me laugh. No. Then where are you? I was parked behind the high school, looking at the football field through a chain-link fence, like somehow the place I'd worked so hard to leave might explain what came next. He waited. Finally, I said, At the school? What for? And because it was him, and because I was too tired to keep carrying it alone, I told him. Not dramatically, just straight through. About the truck, the bank statement, the signatures, the cookout. The way my mom kept calling it borrowing, like vocabulary could change what happened. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then he said, very evenly, Come by the house. I drove there with my eyes still swollen. He was at the kitchen table in a gray t-shirt and work boots, a yellow legal pad in front of him, reading glasses low on his nose. Show me, he said. I handed him the bank printout and the dealership paperwork. He read every line. Then he got up, walked to the hall closet, and came back with a dented green metal box I'd seen my whole life, but never paid attention to. He opened it and started laying papers out on the table. Old deposit slips, account statements, copies of checks, notes in his blocky handwriting. I kept records, he said. Apparently, he had kept records of everything. Every Christmas contribution, every birthday deposit, the $5,000 from the tool sale. A note clipped to one receipt that said, For Mia's education, do not touch for house bills. He tapped that one with his finger. I wrote that in front of your mother. I swallowed hard. I don't care about the money half as much as I care that she thought she could do this and still call herself right, he said. Then he pulled the legal pad closer and started writing. What are you doing? Changing course. That sounded small when he said it. It wasn't. Monday morning, he drove me back to the bank. He asked for copies. He asked questions. He did not raise his voice once. Somehow that made everybody in the room take him more seriously. After that, he took me to breakfast at a diner on Route 52 and told me to order something other than toast because, in his words, you're too upset to make dumb food choices. Over eggs and coffee, he laid out a plan. First, I was emailing Purdue Financial Aid with the bank records and a written explanation. He would help me fill out the appeal. Second, he was covering my housing deposit and first tuition payment directly, not by handing money to anybody in the family. I just stared at him. Grandpa, no. Yes. You don't have to do that. He looked at me over the rim of his coffee cup. I know. That almost made me cry again. "I don't have enough for all 4 years," he said, "but I can get you started. And once you're started, there are loans, work study, scholarships, summer jobs. Starting is what matters." I asked where the money was coming from. He leaned back in the booth. "I sold the F-100 this morning." I actually forgot to breathe for a second. His old 1972 Ford was the thing everybody in the family assumed would go to Mason one day. Grandpa had restored it over 10 years, slow and careful. Mason used to brag about inheriting it like it was already titled in his name. "You sold the truck?" "Yesterday afternoon, after your call. I decided a truck ought to pay for something useful." He said it like he was talking about weather. I looked down at my hands because I couldn't handle how much that meant. "And I met with Sharon Bell at the attorney's office at 9, he added. That got my attention. Sharon Bell had done every will and property transfer in our family since before I was born. "What for?" He buttered his toast. "Because some people think kindness means there are no consequences." He asked all of us to come to his house Wednesday night. My mom already sounded shaky on the phone when she told me. Mason said he wasn't doing some ambush, but he showed up anyway. The 4 of us sat in Grandpa's living room under the old ceiling fan that clicked every third turn. Nobody touched the iced tea my grandpa had set out. He didn't waste time. "I know about the account," he said. My mom opened her mouth. He held up a hand. "No, you've had plenty of chances to talk." She closed it. He looked at Mason. "You took money that was set aside for your sister's education." Mason shifted in his chair. "I said I'm paying it back." "With what?" "I'm getting more work." Grandpa nodded once. "That would carry more weight if the truck you bought didn't have chrome rims and heated seats." Mason looked down. Then Grandpa turned to my mom, and this part was somehow worse. "You helped him." She started crying quietly. "I was trying to help my son." "You have 2 children," he said. Nobody said anything. He went on in the same calm voice. "Here is what's happening now. I paid Mia's deposit and first tuition bill directly to Purdue. I sold the Ford to do it. That truck will not be going to Mason. Neither will my tools, my accounts, or the house you're sitting in." My mom's head snapped up. "Dad!" "No." He pointed toward the front window, toward the yard, toward the whole property. "This house is mine. I let you live here cheap because family needed help. That arrangement is over at the end of the year. I am selling it. Proceeds will go into an education trust for Mia and a scholarship fund at McCutcheon in my son's name." Mason sat back like he'd been hit. My mom looked white. Grandpa folded his hands in his lap. "If either of you were expecting my death to clean up the messes you refuse to fix while I'm alive, let me save you the suspense." The room was so quiet, I could hear the refrigerator kick on in the kitchen. Mason was the first one to speak. "So that's it? You're just cutting us off?" Grandpa looked right at him. "No. You cut yourself off when you decided your sister's future was something you could spend." My mom started crying harder then. Real crying. Not manipulative, not loud. Just broken. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then she turned to me and said, "Mia, please say something." I did, I said. Back when there was still time not to do this. The fallout lasted months. Purdue approved part of my appeal, which helped more than I expected. I took federal loans for the rest, got work study in the library, and picked up summer hours at Mel's until I left. It wasn't the debt-free start I'd planned, but it was a start. My mom texted me a lot that first semester. Long messages at first, then shorter ones when I didn't answer right away. I miss you. We need to heal. Your brother is trying. That last one made me laugh the first time I read it, because trying in my family had always been treated like a result. Mason actually did sell the truck in November. Not because he found his conscience, because once Grandpa's rent arrangement ended, once insurance and payments and real bills started stacking up, the math stopped flattering him. He sold it for less than he owed, complained for weeks, and moved in with a friend outside Frankfurt. A month later, I got an envelope in the mail with a cashier's check for $3,000 and no note. I deposited it. Forgiveness and reimbursement are not the same thing. My relationship with my mom came back slower. The first real conversation we had was over winter break in Grandpa's kitchen. She asked if I hated her. I told her no. Then I told her I didn't trust her. She cried again, but quieter than before. She said she had spent so many years worrying Mason would fall apart that she stopped noticing I was the one being asked to hold everything together. That was probably the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. I told her honesty would have helped before the bank statement. We sat with that for a while. Healing, if that's what you call it, didn't look dramatic. It looked like boundaries. It looked like me keeping my own bank account. It looked like her not asking for access to anything. It looked like conversations ending when they needed to end. Grandpa lived long enough to see me finish my sophomore year. On move-in weekend that first fall, he rode with me to campus in my Civic packed with plastic bins and Target bedding. He walked me up to the dorm, looked around at the cinder block walls and extra-long twin bed, and said, "Well, they certainly charge enough for ugly furniture." Then he handed me a folded deposit slip from 2014. It was for $200. His handwriting was across the top, for Mia's way out. "I kept one," he said, "in case you ever forgot what the money was for." I still have it. Not because of the amount, because of the sentence. People hear this story and focus on the truck, which I understand. It's the easy symbol. Shiny blue paint, bad decisions, family betrayal you can point at with a finger. But the truck was never the whole story. The real story was what my brother believed he was entitled to, what my mother believed I would survive, and what my grandfather refused to let become normal. That's what changed everything. Not the sale, not the will, not even the tuition check. It was the moment someone in my family finally said, out loud and with consequences, that my future was not the family emergency fund. And once that was said, nothing could go back to the way it had been. Good. It shouldn't have.